What's going on, guys? I'm Gibbs. I was on the RLCS desk this weekend, and in the pre-show, we had a roster move topic brought up, and we brought up the idea of Daniel, the roster move to Space Station Gaming. What to rate that out of 10? And before we get into why I rated it what I did, why don't we just play the clip, and then we can go over it. So, take a listen.
Daniel to SSG in place of Sipical. They're already got a bit of a higher one on this one.
We started out higher.
Wow. Yeah.
Really? Oh, it's going back up.
They're floating around. All right, I'm curious what you guys got.
Whatever.
I'm curious what you guys got. Okay. Let's get your whiteboards. Turn around in 3, 2, 1.
I went early.
Turtle wants to get it right there.
Guys,
He's like,
I'm ready.
What are we talking about?
What are you?
What are we talking about?
Gibbs, off
Daniel's
board.
not a player like Typical. Sure, he
Bro,
hasn't
how are
won
you going to
anything
go
yet.
from roasting Sipical and then
He's
you're
still-
like, the replacement was a 4? Hey,
Because he's still a world-class player, but if you're going to go by average of a 5, Daniel is not the player that makes no sense. Why would you go with 10? Space Station lost their best player.
Think about the longevity of picking up Daniel. Think about what
no,
that
so
investment
no way.
is.
No way. I'm just going to roast every player, all right? Every
Gibbs
roster move upgrading low, I guess.
Gibbs is throwing. He's making the desk lose
5
all
is an
credibility.
average. Daniel's worse than Typical. I don't understand. I'm so confused. All right. And we're back. So, let's go over what grading a roster move is, because I think people got the wrong impression. I'm not trying to say that Daniel is a 4 out of 10 player. That is not the question. The question is the roster move. Typical gone from Space Station. Typical leaves. They replace him with Daniel. What's the grade there? So, for the most part, I would say, all right, so 5's an average. I still have no idea why Daz and Turtle put a 10. Literally have no idea. When they put Typical as a 10 for Dazzard, I think Turtle only put him as like a 7 for FaZe. So I could see maybe Turtle, like if he really thinks that Daniel is better than Sip, sure. But 10 still seems relatively high. So if you look at it, Space Station with Typical, Space Station with Daniel, I get Fall Split wasn't a great split for them. I don't think that is their normal. So you could fight. I think you could fight and say a 6. I think that's maximum. And obviously after this weekend, Daniel really showed up. An outstanding performance. Sure. Now what? Like people will say, it's the greatest roster move of all time. My argument is, so I've seen this on Reddit too, and it's not like, it doesn't really get me angry. I just find it funny that people are like, that's the worst take I've ever heard, putting Daniel as a 4 of a roster move for Space Station. And I'm like, you know what? I think what they just wrote is the worst take I've ever heard, because they don't understand what a roster move grade is. 5 is an average. Daniel moving to Space Station. Would Space Station have kicked their best player and replaced him with Daniel? What's the answer? No. They absolutely wouldn't have. So immediately right there, Space Station thinks the Daniel roster move is less than a 5. Because if it's a 5, maybe a 5 at most, right? Where it's like, we're equal to where we were. They're not going to kick their best player in Typical and replace them with Daniel. There is no world where they do that. So how could it be any higher than a 5? Doesn't make any sense to me. FaZe, on the other side, they picked up Typical. They could have picked up Daniel. They chose to not pick up Daniel. So FaZe, as well, also thinks that the roster move to Space Station is likely lower than a 5. Now, I think 4 is actually a pretty high grade. I was rating Daniel very highly there. I'm not saying Daniel's a 4 out of 10. I was saying he's probably like an 8 out of 10 because we have to see him on the field, and obviously that will grow. Because obviously we talk about the best player in Space Station and Typical. I would put him as a 9 out of 10. I think he still needs to have that clutch factor. We talked about that on the desk, wherein he does not have a lot of first place finishes, and there's a lot of times when he's in a final he chokes. And he's never carried his team in a final. He's never had the highest octane rating on his team in any event that he's ever won when it comes to a finals. I want to see that out of SIP before I put him as like one of the best in NA. So I think a lot of people do have him as one of like the best in NA, like in the conversation of top 3. With like First Killer, maybe a Justin, and like SIP, I guess. Like I think people rate Mist relatively highly as well, but obviously Mist right now, there's a lot going on in Team Envy. So for me, I put that as an 8, mostly because Illusion played fantastic at LAN. So I wanted to downgrade a point for that because, like, I felt bad for Illusion, you know? Yeah, why not? And then one more point because there's no ice in Sipical just yet. I want to see the ice coming out. So that's why I gave Daniel a 4. Just below him because I'm like, all right, like, if Daniel enters the league, I think he's behind. He's probably, like, in the top 10 conversation, but I have to see it on the field first, right? So that's all I'm trying to say, guys. That's all I'm trying to say. I don't think people understood how to grade a roster move, or maybe I just have like a different impression of it. Because I do think what Space Station did once they lost their player, if you're just talking about, all right, Space Station, who could they have picked up? If you grade that out of 10, I would say 10 out of 10, right? You pick up the best free agent possible. That worked out pretty well, right? But that's not the question. The question is the roster window itself, the roster trade window. What did Space Station have? What did Space Station gain? What did Space Station lose? How do you compare the two? So I'm a little confused there. So a few of the other grades we'll talk about. G2 to Atomic. Like, I like the idea of talent to come onto a team. I know Gary Chi was the complete opposite in his interviews. He thinks, like, we're beyond that point where, like, talent doesn't matter as much because everyone is so good. And I will say I don't think we're there just yet in North America. So I think there still is room for improvement there where you can still get more talented players and then try and mold around them. So I put Atomic as an 8 on G2, I believe it was, because I do think he is more talented than Adrees, but they have to figure that out, right? And once they get there, the hard part is, like, Atomic was very hot and cold on Envy, but I thought that would go to more hot more often on a G2 because I felt like with Envy, a lot of it kind of was like, Atomic, you have to do the thing, and Mist will be there with you. And then Turbo, he'll play well if Atomic plays well, but if Atomic plays poorly, then Turbo plays poorly, and then it kind of is just like just an ongoing problem, right? So that's what I had there. A couple of the others, I'm trying to think of what the other ones were. Like Drees, I put as a 2, I believe it was, for Envy, because I did not like how Envy made this roster move with like 12 hours to spare in the trade window. I thought that was not great for the players on their team. They didn't have time to try out players. They could have put a limit on G2 and be like, hey, do this 5 days earlier. Here's your limit. Do it, I don't know, the 28th of December. Of like, and if you don't do this deal by then for Atomic, we're not giving you Atomic. They could have easily done something like that. Then it gives like a 5-day window where if it does happen, then Envy can go out and pursue other players like a Beast Mode. A couple others we didn't talk about was version 1 to Beast Mode or Beast Mode to version 1. And I think I would agree with that probably like a 9, I would say probably, because I think it does add a lot of talent to that squad. I just worry a little bit about Beast Mode behind the scenes and all that stuff because we don't really know what happened on SR. And then with Com saying like, oh, Beast Mode is trying to leave. He's trying to get out of this contract or right before he signs it. So you just weren't sure what was happening there. But he's still a very talented player coming onto that team. And obviously he showed his worth throughout this tournament. So Beast Mode obviously is looking pretty good. And I think that was basically it. I'm probably forgetting someone. But those are all the roster moves. Oh, maybe like an Aqua to Rogue. I think that is a fantastic move for them. I would say that's probably 10 because I do think like he brings just mechanical prowess to that team, and I think it'll make their team better. I still think they need more parts around Aqua. Like I think he's now the best player on that team. But obviously it's only one tournament, right? So there's still plenty more to play. But I think if they build around Aqua, I think Rogue has something going. I just don't know how you build around him, who gets replaced or not. There's still plenty of time, right? It's hard to tell where Rogue is because they had a tough schedule. They had a tough group in Space Station and FaZe in their group, and obviously both those teams looking great. But that was the roster mania going on in NA. Europe obviously made fewer moves. It's going to be more talk about Europe later in the week. I won't be on the show for RLCS. I'll be on the Dignitas stream, though, so come check that out. Me and Leaf will be on there on Friday, so we'll talk a lot about that stuff there. But I just wanted to get my thoughts out on why Daniel is the roster move of Daniel is a 4 out of 10. Not that Daniel is a 4 out of 10. Just wanted to get those thoughts out there because I think people misinterpreted my grade. So I don't want to throw Daniel under the bus and call him a 4 out of 10. But yeah, so I hope you enjoyed the show this weekend. I had a lot of fun, and I'll be back for the NA show in a couple weeks. So come check me out there. But thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.